So today
Bill.
is Thursday, June the 9th, 2022. And who are you?
I'm Brandon Rumbley of Nashville, Tennessee.
How do you spell your last name?
Rumbley, R-U-M-B-L-E-Y.
And where do you live?
I live in Nashville, Tennessee.
Like north, south, east,
You want
west?
my actual address?
No,
I'm
I
not
don't think.
gonna
I
tell you
think
my actual address.
I think that would be a bad idea.
I live just east of Nashville, right by the airport.
And is this the home you live in now, or the home you're building?
This is the home I live in now, and we are about to build in Lebanon, Tennessee, which is a little further out from all the Nashville craziness.
And tell everybody about your family.
So I have a lovely wife of, 20 years this year. Like 3 of the best years of my life. And I have.
Did I tell you this is being recorded?
Yeah.
Okay.
She doesn't like me that much. She'll never watch it. And then I have 3
Nobody
kids.
likes you that much. Nobody's going to like it. Watch it. Don't worry.
3 kids, 2 girls that are 13 and 11, and then a 7-year-old son.
Good. Any pets?
No pets.
How come?
Mostly because I hate pets.
But how did you?
I'm one of those people that hates dogs. Like, I know there aren't many of us out there, but like, I don't like to be licked when I don't want to be licked, and
Wait.
dogs do that.
So I got to make sure I. Yeah. Okay. I won't.
Yeah. Yeah, not a big cat fan. So yeah, luckily my kids are allergic to both cats and dogs. So
Fish.
we have chickens in the backyard. Actually,
Birds. Why not a parrot?
I guess if my kids wanted a parrot, I probably could go for that. But we
Gerbil?
settled on no gerbils. Chickens in the backyard. I live in suburbia. I'm on like a half-acre lot, but we had 6 chickens, and sadly, Sylvia was.
Stop.
Are we back on?
Yes, we're back on.
So the video got interrupted because Bill is old and he doesn't know how to work his phone, and somebody called in and he should have had it on airplane mode. So now we're back. I have 5 chickens. Used to be 6 chickens, but Sylvia, sadly.
We lost Sylvia. Wait, was that Thanksgiving or?
No, we have a fox in the neighborhood.
You have a fox.
And the fox. My
Well,
girls were upstairs looking out their window, and they saw the fox somehow get inside our fenced backyard and chased Sylvia down, and Sylvia no more, and then attacked Lacey, but Lacey survived. So we're nursing her back to health. So
I'm glad to hear
5
that.
hens.
So are you physically nursing this chicken?
Negative. I don't do anything with the chickens.
Okay.
Actually, quick funny story. My wife was like, "Yeah, the girls want to get chickens. Let's get some chickens." And I was like, "Okay, let's do this." But I don't want to do anything with the chickens. So just so we're clear, they're your chickens, the kids' chickens. I don't do anything with the chickens. And she's just like, "Yeah, fine." So we get the chickens, we put them in the backyard. My kids were still very young at this point. And she comes in and she walks in with a positive pregnancy test. And then she says, "The doctor says I really shouldn't be around the chickens if I'm pregnant." So for the next, I guess it was 7 months at that time by the time we figured it out. But yeah, next 7 or 8 months, I'm doing everything with the chickens. But since then, she's held good on her promise. The kids and my wife take care of everything.
This is good. Have you ever heard Ron White tell his Tiger Wood and chicken story?
I don't think I have.
You should hear that sometime. When did you start investing in real estate?
Yes, if you call it actually investing. I bought my first property in 2004. So I graduated college in 2002. And 2004 is when I bought my first property. So I was 24-ish years old and had read a couple of books, had never done any education, hadn't figured anything out, but just said, yeah, let's give this a shot. So I overpaid for the property, under budgeted, hired the wrong people, paid the contractor 3/3 of the money when 2/3 of the job was done, and then he bailed. And so I spent 7 or 8 months finishing the house myself and putting the siding on, and I hired a couple hourly guys that would help me, and I made $5,000 on the deal for about 8 months of my life.
So what you're saying is, other than 1 or 2 small glitches, it was a home run
perfect
deal. Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Textbook.
No issues.
Why real estate? What drew you to that?
So I'm old enough that there was no YouTube University or podcast or any of the stuff that there is now for real estate education, where you can go on and get all the prolific amounts of mediocre information on YouTube. And so I'd read a book that was written by a Nashville investor, and my older brother had gotten this book. He was taking a course on real estate investing in college, local community college. And so this book was part of their curriculum. And at the time, I was working third shift at the airport. And so...
Doing what?
So again, this was before everything was automated. So when you came out of the parking garage, you had to hand your ticket to a little troll in the toll booth. I was the troll.
You were that troll?
Yeah.
I did not know you'd ever been a troll.
I was a troll once upon a time. Third shift troll, even. And so the last flight...
That's like the troll of the trolls.
Correct. The last flight would come in at like 11 p.m. And then the first flight was at, they'd get there at 4 or 5. So I had like 5 hours of just either sleeping or reading. And so I would pick different books to read. And so my brother gave me the book. I read it and I was like, this makes a lot of sense. Let me go invest in an asset without really knowing anything about how to do that. But I got to the end of the 8 months and I was like, all right, I know I royally screwed that up. And I also know that I can do it better the next time. And so went on to deal number 2 and made more mistakes, but not as many. And then deal number 3, and finally got to a point where I was doing, up until 2008, I was flipping 3 to 4 houses a year. So not crazy involved, but...
So you're more of a flipper when you started, not so much a keeper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did your mom and dad play any part in you getting into real estate investing? Did they do it? Did they encourage? Did they discourage?
Yeah. There was no encouragement. I wouldn't say there was any discouragement outside of just some negative stinking thinking, whatever you want to call it, around real estate and investments in general. Like, yeah, it's never going to work out. Like, remember, I got my first deal under contract, and I told my dad about it, and I was like, yeah, so it's a 5-acre piece of land, and well, it's one of my first deals. I think this was right after the other one. 5-acre piece of land, and tax appraisal is 120 on it, and I got it under contract at 45. And I don't even know how I knew about this, because I hadn't met you at that time. Maybe it was in that book, or there's a section on it, but I just threw some stuff together. So I bought it for 45 because the guy needed a quick cash. And I said, you can buy it back for 55 or 60 within an 18-month period. And then
you're given an option.
And then you'll lease the land for me during that. So it was a lease option. So I bought it from him, lease optioned it back to him for an 18-month period.
Good for you.
And so I'm all excited about this deal, and I'm telling my dad about it. And he's just like, well, what if he doesn't buy it back though? And I was like, then I'll sell it for $120,000. Like, that's the tax appraisal on it. And he's just like, yeah, but what if it doesn't sell for 120? I was like, then I'll sell it for 100. But what if it doesn't sell for 100? And it's like, Dad, did you hear the part where I bought it for $45,000? And it was just like, clearly this was not going to work out. So just a little bit of negativity around it. So there wasn't a discouragement, but like, yeah, this is not going to work out.
Where are you in your real estate investing career? You're not a starter. Are you an estate builder, or are you an ender?
I'm trying to become an ender. So
how close are you? I think you've already crossed. Personally, I think you've already crossed the line, because I think you have enough.
I could quit working and never have to work again.
So ender, you just want to build up the quality of life you're going to have as an ender by continuing to acquire more assets.
Yep. And we're in a position, I say we, I've got 2 partners that I do most of my real estate investing with. And so we're in a position where, because we really, in 2009, we hit the ground running when the market had crashed. We held on to a bunch of rentals, did fix and flips, eventually got into new construction. And our return on investment for those properties that we bought way back in 2009, 10, 11, 12 is amazing. But our return on our equity, because Nashville property has appreciated so much, the cash flows that we get compared to the equity that's in the properties is not so stellar. So we've mitigated some of that by investing in some Airbnbs where we can get higher cash flow. But the ones that are long-term rentals, they cash flow, but when you compare that to the equity, it's not so great. So I think if we could pivot out of those and 1031 exchange into some better cash flowing properties, then that gets me in a much better spot for monthly cash flow. And then we're also focusing on a lending company. So, I think I don't know if it was you or somebody else that said Ender is lender without the L.
Yep.
So we're kind of transitioning into doing lending and using the wrap structure that we learned from you. And
So I want to gear down for a second. Let's go back to when you said you're going to 1031. I want you to explain what that means and into some better properties. So let's start with explaining the problem that you're having, because you have lots of equity in your properties, but the cash flow is not what you want. Explain what and why.
See, apparently I don't know how to put my phone on silent after.
See, Brandon's an old guy and he doesn't know how to use his iPhone, and it sits there and goes off in the middle of an interview. But we really won't worry about this.
What was the question again? Oh, 1031.
No. Before 1031, let's talk about your property. You said you bought the properties back during the downturn, and that you were talking about the equity, and then you also were talking about the cash flow and the comparison. What is the problem you're having? Does that mean the properties aren't cash flowing?
It means they are cash flowing compared to what we paid for them. So, for example, we've got a duplex on the corner of Northview and Lytton, and we bought it for $16,000 in the downturn, and it was beat to crap. But so we probably put another 30 in it, but we're all in for, let's call it 50 grand into this duplex, and it rents for now $1,200 a side. So cash flow is pretty great when you think invested 50 and we got $2,400 a month in gross rents on this thing. However, the dirt that's now sitting on is approaching $500,000. So if we owed 50 on it, we now have $450,000 in equity, and we have that same 2,400 gross coming in, which is going to be close to a 1,200 net, maybe a 1,400 net without any debt service, in net cash flow on 450 grand. That's not so sexy. So, because the properties have appreciated to a point where an investor could no longer come in and buy that same property and cash flow from day one.
So what would the rent need to be if you could just wave a wand? What would the rent need to be coming in every month for it to be a good property for you?
So our threshold used to be 2% of whatever we were into the property for, which those deals are pretty much non-existent, especially in Nashville proper. So I'd have to sell that property. This gets back to the 1031. I don't want to sell that property because now I've got a $450,000 gain plus depreciation recapture, and I'm going to have to pay 20% long-term capital gains tax on that sale if I sell it. So I've got, 80 grand that evaporates in taxes. So a 1031 exchange allows me to either trade deeds with someone else and trade properties and then move my current $50,000 basis into that other property, and their basis moves into the duplex on Northview. Or I can do a delayed exchange through a qualified intermediary, sell the property, take the 450 grand and put it in escrow with that accommodator, and then I've got 45 days to identify new properties and 6 months, I think it's 6 months, to close on one or more of those properties. And that allows me to defer that long-term capital gains tax so that I don't get hit with that tax bill. So if I could locate properties that were better cash flowing properties, so let's say I go to Jackson, Tennessee up the road, and I can buy 4 houses for that same $500,000, and those houses are gonna bring in, $1,200 net a month each. Well, now I've got $4,800 in net cash flow on that same equity that's moved from a Nashville location to a Jackson location, and my return on that equity is much higher.
And why is it called a 1031? Why is that structure called a 1031?
That's the IRS code section 1031.
Cool. So you touched on this when you started answering this question, but that's the next question I have is, do you invest on your own? Do you have partners? Is it a husband and wife thing? So explain who you invest with.
So we got 2 partners, Jason, Brandon, and Brandon. And I do 90% of my investing with the 2 of them. So that was kind of our deal in 2009 when we partnered up, was if any of us had a real estate deal, we'd bring it first to the company with the 3 of us. And then if the company wanted to do that deal, then we'd do it. If they didn't, then we could do it individually. So if any of us comes across a deal, whether it's a note or a rehab or new construction or whatever, then that deal comes to the company first, and then company gets to decide if we want to do it or pass on it. Most of the time the company does it, but there's been a couple of deals that company didn't want to do and I've done outside the company.
And in this organization, what are your responsibilities and what are your partner's responsibilities?
So I do marketing, acquisitions, dispositions. So I'm in charge of finding us deals and then getting rid of the deals once we're ready to sell them. So I'm a licensed agent as well. The other Brandon is in charge of operations. So he actually builds the houses, manages the rehabs, out in the field doing the construction work, and he's a licensed general contractor as well. And then Jason is kind of the CFO of the business, so handles all the books and payments and all that side of the business.
Good marriage?
And Jason also works with the property management company that we co-own with another investor.
And this has been a good marriage?
Yeah.
In real estate, what does your wife do as far as, does she help you with the houses? Does she go look at houses, go through the houses, help? Do you talk the decisions over with her? What role does she play?
We talk about deals, and like if we have a great deal that we put together, then we'll talk about it, and I'll brag about my prowess and deal structuring or whatever. But that's pretty much the extent of it. So yeah, I wouldn't never want her job because she's homeschooling our kids and she's fantastic at it, and I would royally suck at it. But yeah, I'm super grateful that real estate has afforded us a lifestyle where she doesn't have to work and gets to stay home with our kids and raise them. So that's her thing.
What do your non-investor friends think about what you do? What do they think that you do, and are they puzzled by it, or what response do you get from them?
I don't really like non-investors, so I don't have any non-investor friends. No, I've got a few, and yeah, I think there's a lot of the mentality that my dad had that is just, yeah, it's not going to work out. Or I heard about a guy who had some rental properties and tenants destroyed the place, and yeah, but I mean, real estate doesn't always go up, and like there's just a lot of misconceptions and negativity around real estate, and so. And for a while there, they were sort of looking like, like they were right, because we had some lean years where we were holding on to properties, but it's like, all right, I've got to go get a second job to make ends meet and that sort of thing. But I think we always believed in the long game of buying and holding real estate is, in my opinion, the best way to build long-term wealth for the average American. And so I think now we're at a point, and we don't live flashy lifestyles, but they see that we've got freedoms to take some vacations and travel, and like for the month of August this year, we're renting a cabin in Napa, California, and flying out with the whole family and just chilling for a month in Napa. And they don't get to do that because they have 9-to-5s and responsibilities and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think, but there's always a bit of a, yeah, I wouldn't be able to do that. Or I actually was just talking with a friend the other day, and I explained to him a wrap deal that we were doing where we're achieving a 56% ROI if it pays back in 6 months. And I ran through the math and everything, and he's like, yeah, that sounds cool, but I mean, you got to know that you got to, like, it takes money to make money. And I was like, no, that's a limiting belief that you have, and you just tell yourself that. And so if you tell yourself that, it will be true. But you know how much money I had when I started? Negative, actually. Like, I owed more money to people than I had, like no assets. And we've been able to build some wealth over the last 10 to 12 years. So yeah, I think there's a lot of negativity and misconceptions from my non-investor friends.
How big of an area do you work?
We are pretty much all Davidson County, which is Nashville, Davidson County. And really, our core focus is probably within a 5 square mile area, East Nashville. If a deal pops up somewhere else, we'll look at it and potentially do it. But we pretty much work East Nashville, which is a part of town that was developed in the earliest at the 30s. Maybe a few 1920s homes, but most of it was built out in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And now we just do infill development and buy lots or tear downs in those neighborhoods. And we've got the bulk of our rental portfolio in the same part of town. So pretty small area is where our core focus is. But we've got some property in Chattanooga. We just closed on one in Wisconsin. But yeah, the bulk of it's.
So you have friends that invest in multiple states. What makes you stay closer to home, and what makes them spread out more? And which one's better?
I don't know that there is a better. I like being able to drive and take a look at the properties and don't have to trust that somebody else is managing, unless you like the partner. Like, we're partnering with a guy in Wisconsin that we think is a good manager on a self-storage facility, and if we didn't trust him, we wouldn't have done that deal. But yeah, I think just us having more control and being able to swing by the properties, and there's some synergy with the businesses that we have in that we own the property management company that manages our properties, and we have the GC, and we have the realtor, and we have the relationships with the lenders here, and so it's just. Yeah, so I don't know that one's better than the other. It's just our skill set probably lends itself more to staying local.
How do you find your deals?
So when we started in real estate, our marketing strategy was log into MLS and pick your deal because they were everywhere. But that's no longer the case, and so we've got last year we started a wholesaling / marketing company. With a young local guy, and so at this point we've got 8 virtual assistants, most of them in Costa Rica, and we have about 160 hours a week of outbound calls and do some SMS text messaging to find those deals.
How do you fund them?
Fund them? We have relationships with a lot of hard money lenders that we've built over the years, and we've got relationships with local banks as well. So it depends on how quickly we need to move on the deal. And if we have the cash available, then we just fund it with cash that we've been able to build up over the years. But if not, we'll call a hard money lender if it needs to close quickly. And if we've got the time to run it through a bank, then we'll close it with a local portfolio or construction lender.
With your rental property, and you kind of touched on this, but who manages it?
So we own a property management company, and we started that in 2012. So by 2012, we had built up, I think we maybe owned 40 units at the time, and Bob, our partner in that business, he and his wife owned another 30 or 40 units. So between those 70 or 80 units, we could afford to start a property management company, take 5% of the gross rents, and bring on a full-time employee that we could train to manage all of those properties. So that was the impetus for starting that property, was just we didn't want to do it anymore, the property management company. We didn't want to do it anymore, and we had enough rents that we could bring a person in. And then it sort of organically grew from there. We had other investor friends that were like, hey, will you manage my 5 or 6 units here or there? So we went from those 80 units, and today we manage somewhere around 300, 325 units, something like that.
That's incredible. I want you to go back to the first 1, 2, 3 deals you ever did. Okay? So you're going to have to gear way back down. What was your skill level? How did you find those deals? How did you fund those first 1, 2, 3 deals? And what was your exit strategy?
All right, so deal number 1 was the house in Old Hickory that I screwed up every which way. And that one, I actually talked my dad into partnering with me on that one. So my dad funded that one. I found it, I'm trying to remember if that was not MLS. I think that was just word of mouth. I had a friend who lived in the area, and he was in the process of rehabbing a house, and he had hired a contractor to work on it, and that contractor knew about seller. A couple of them had seen a sign or something and said, well, there's another house that's beat up over here that maybe you could buy. And so I just got in touch with the seller and negotiated the deal. And
Did you know what you were doing?
no clue.
What made
I
you
read that book.
But what made you take that meeting? Because you didn't know really what to say, and a lot of investors who are newer do not want to sit down and talk to the seller because they're absolutely terrified. And most people think that the scary part of investing is making an offer, and it's not. It's when you make an offer and
It's when it gets accepted. That's
then all of a sudden you're like,
Yeah.
what do I do next? How do I pay for it? I need to check on this.
Yeah.
So go back again. That's what I want you to talk about. How did you overcome that?
Yeah, I think part of it was just naivete. I was young and 23, 24 years old and optimistic, and didn't think anything could ever go wrong, and I'd run the numbers on my yellow pad, and it was going to be a fantastic deal. And so I think a lot of it was just misplaced optimism, because I should have been more skeptical and run more numbers and invited in a mentor to talk with about the deal. But we'll chalk number 1 up to naivete, and then I got it funded with my dad, and maybe I contributed to his negativity around real estate because that deal took forever and we barely made any money. But so that was deal number 1. Deal number 2 was, I can't remember, 2 and 3 are right around the same time. So deal number 2 would have been that piece of land that was in Antioch, Tennessee, that 5-acre piece that I bought and then lease optioned back. And with that one, by this time I had started a little mortgage brokerage, and so I had a little bit of income from that, and so I could qualify for a bank loan on that. So with that one, the loan to value was so stupidly low that I'm pretty sure I got 100% financing, 100% of purchase price, because I was buying it for 45 and the tax appraisal was 120. So I just bought it on a 5 or 6% 20-year note, something like that, with the bank. And then the third deal, I think you and I have talked about this before, but this is one of my better deals in real estate still to this day, and one that I regret the most. And it was the same sale and then lease option back to the seller, that same strategy. But I had the mortgage brokerage. Lady called in East Tennessee, and she had a 18-acre parcel of land. Well, she called in to refinance her house, her primary residence, and I pulled her credit score, and it was like a 4. And I was like, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do anything. Even back then, and subprime stuff going on, I couldn't do anything for her. But somehow I had the presence of mind to go, well, do you own anything else? And she said, well, I've got this property that I inherited from my dad, and the whole reason she wanted to refinance was to pay off a car that was in default. So she had a Chevy Tahoe or something that she needed to pay off. So that was 40 grand, and she owned this property free and clear. So I structured the same deal where I said, well, I know that it's way below market, but I could give you $55,000 for the 18 acres. And this is 18 acres in Sevierville, Tennessee, at the foot of the Smoky Mountains on Douglas Lake.
Oh,
lake frontage. It had 26 pads, trailer park, 18 of which were rented. 9 of which actually paid anything each month, but it was a great property. So I bought it for 55 grand with my partner in the mortgage company, and we actually just went to a referral from her to a local bank in the area and said, hey, we'd like to buy this property. And again, the loan to value was so stupidly low that they agreed to it. And so, yeah, we bought it for 55. She had an 18-month option, and then she was supposed to pay us, I think, half of whatever the rent that was coming in, that she told us was coming in. We bought the property. And so 18 months later, she doesn't exercise her option. She took the money and paid off her Chevy Tahoe, but never did anything to try to get the property back and work on her situation. And so we ended up owning this 18-acre on Douglas Lake in Sevierville, Tennessee. And at that point, I had become a little bit of a motivated seller because I'm 25, 26 years old and managing it from, a couple hundred miles away. And I'm not the best at managing anything, especially not trailer parks that are 300 miles away. So, we got a call or a letter from somebody who was interested in buying it. And so we sold it and tripled our money on it, which at the time I was super excited about. And now I look back and I go, I sold 18 acres at the foot of the Smoky Mountains on Douglas Lake for $160,000.
And it was a mobile home park, income producing property.
That was debatable, the income producing part. but yeah,
it is Sevierville.
Yeah, so the last time I looked back in 2012, it sold for $550,000. That same property sold for $550,000. And I mean, today it's probably a $2 million piece of dirt that should have held on to, but I didn't. But that also gave me a big chunk of cash and kind of pushed me into, moving into real estate full time. So can't have too many regrets.
Nope. How scared were you when you did those first 1, 2, 3 deals?
Again, I don't know if it was just because I was young and dumb, but I was pretty optimistic. Every time, I mean, nobody gets into a deal and goes, can't wait to lose my ass on this one. So everybody thinks they're going to make money on every deal or else they wouldn't do it. But yeah, I was pretty optimistic on all the deals. So maybe that's a bad thing, but never really been that scared of getting into a deal for some reason.
As a starter back then, what were your biggest hurdles?
Finding money, finding cash.
How'd you overcome that?
Talk to people.
Were you mainly going to institutions? Were you using private money? Were you using hard money?
Yeah, it was all private money. And that's what I was explaining to my buddy the other day. It was just like, well, you got to know people that have money or, it takes money to make money and all that. I'm like, well, no, if you find a deal, then the money will come to that deal. And so if you actually have a deal, not like you think you've got a deal, but it's an actual deal, then finding the money is the easy part, especially in today's market. But even back then, when we were getting started, if you had an actual deal, the hurdle that you have to overcome is your experience level. And so, the first couple of deals, especially if you've got a Harrier rehab or a deal where you're going to have to invest some serious money in the renovation, then it's, and we deal with that on our side because now we are the lender lending to other people. And if someone has no experience, then we're a lot more hesitant to make that loan than if they've got 4 or 5 deals that they've done already, and we can look at the before and afters and all that. But there's the money's always there if you find the deal. And so for us, it was friends of friends. Just ask people, hey, I'm looking to fund this real estate deal. Do you have anybody who might be interested in making a X amount of % return, whatever you're willing to pay? And early on, we paid a lot higher hard money rates than we pay today, but the numbers made sense for those deals, and so we paid what we had to pay to get the money.
I want to make sure that we really cover this hard. So you just let everybody know what you were needing and what you're willing to pay for the money, and you just, to anybody, to everybody.
Yep.
You just talked.
Yep. And now it's easier than ever, because back then this was pre-Facebook, and I guess Facebook was kind of just coming around, but like now you just get on and find a real estate group that's on Facebook, or you find your local RIA, or you post on your personal page and say, hey, I've got this real estate deal looking for money, and you got to put yourself out there and let people know what you're doing and what you need.
When you started, could you envision the level of success that you've had?
Not a chance.
How come?
I think we all hoped that it would be successful, and to some extent believed that it would be successful. But the other piece of it is we just had impeccable timing. Like, did a little bit of real estate investing up before the '08 crash, but not much. And so got no bumps or bruises or cuts from the crash, but lived through it, and that we were doing investing during that time period. And then 2009, it was like the market had just
In 2009, most investors got out of the business. Most gurus were out of the business. Most realtors were out of the business. What made you move forward?
Again, I think part of it is timing, because we weren't overexposed. Like, we hadn't leveraged up, and we didn't have a rental portfolio that we had over leveraged, or paid high prices in '06, knowing that it was gonna triple by '08, like a lot of investors were doing back then. And so for us, it was like, well, okay, last year this property was this much, and now we can buy it for half of that. And so, for us, it was just, there's blood in the water. We got to go buy some property.
When you were starting out, how many people told you you would fail?
I'm trying to think if I had anybody actually say you will fail.
It's not so much they say it, they
Yeah.
think it. And you know it. They're like, oh, you're going to do really great. And but there's always a but.
Yeah.
So
Lots. Yeah.
So they thought you were nuts. Don't do this.
Yeah. Because everybody's heard that story. I mentioned it earlier, the landlord story of, they rented to the wrong people, or, the mortgage company did this to me, or yada, yada, yada. Like, there's all the stories about why it won't work. And, most people are prone to believe those types of things versus finding people that are successful in real estate and learning from those people instead of listening to all the people that say you can't do it.
There's somebody listening to you right now, and they're on the fence about a deal, or maybe getting into investing. And they're nervous, and they're scared, and there are people around them telling them, mistake, don't do it, think about it some more, take more classes. They're being warned not to move forward. What's your advice for those people?
You have to ask yourself, who's telling me that this is a bad deal? Because if it's your aunt or your grandma or your mother-in-law, whoever, and they have zero experience with real estate, then that's not the person you should be listening to. But you should find the right people to talk to and say, is this a good deal or not? And even give up part of the deal if you have need to do that to get it done.
What does that mean?
It means find someone in your local area who knows what the hell they're doing, and go to them and say, is this a deal or not? And I'm willing to give you 20% of the deal if you want to partner on it. Or, you walk me through it and mentor me, and we'll split the profits 50-50, or whatever you have to do. I did a bunch of those deals early on to get the money, where I would find the deal, he would fund the deal, I would do all the work on the house, I would sell the house, get done with it, and we'd split the profits 50-50.
Do you feel that was a fair deal looking back?
Sure.
How come? Because you were doing almost all the work and you found it. Why was that a fair deal?
One, because I did the deal. It's like the Pete Fortunato always says, like, that both parties thought it was a good deal when they made the deal because they actually did it. Like, no one goes to the closing table like they think they're going to be in a better position by signing that paperwork than if they don't sign the paperwork. So I did the deal because I thought that half of the profit was going to be worth my efforts. But I also was young and inexperienced, and somebody was taking a chance to put up the money on the deal, and they deserved to get whatever they could negotiate to get, and I deserved to get whatever I could negotiate to get. And at some point, I had to have a conversation of, all right, we've done 7 or 8 of these now, and I like you. I just don't like you that much to keep giving you 50% of the deal. And so we renegotiated and moved forward. But back to the original question, like that was the mistake that I made early on, was not bringing in people who knew what they were doing. And I had read the book and thought I had it figured out, and I could handle it. So yeah, going back, I would, on those first several deals, I'd bring somebody in who had experience, even if it meant I had to give up part of the deal to get someone on my team that could help guide me in the way I needed to go.
Of your main character traits, which ones have played the most important role in your success?
I'm gregarious. So I can build rapport with people easily and gain people's trust, and yeah, I think that's my most important trait.
Who are your most important teachers?
So Pete Fortunato is the top of the list for me. There's some other guy I can't think of his name.
No, I'm not. The question's serious.
And it's a serious answer. You are one of my most important teachers, and without you, we certainly would be in a different spot from where we are today. So I'm grateful for you. But there are others: Dyke Spotiford and John Heyer, Gary Johnston. Yeah, and that's super important to find the right educators and the right teachers, because there's a group that is out there that actually cares about teaching and educating and isn't about selling the coaching program or upselling you on X, Y, or Z throughout the weekend, but just really is invested in educating that next generation on real estate investing. And yeah, we certainly would be nowhere near where we are today without getting plugged in with the right group of.
So when you find a good teacher, do you just go to them one time, one class, or what?
Yeah, I've seen Pete, I don't know, 25 or 30 times at this point. And first time I saw Pete, I got 5% of what he said, maybe. And then next time it was maybe 10%. It's about a 5% jump every time I went back. And so, now I'm up to whatever it is, 80%. But yeah, it's an investment that you need to make. And honestly, that's one of the more important tools that you can have in your tool bag is getting the right education to know how to structure deals. And then it also becomes, well, one part of it just becomes fun. Like you develop friends at all the conferences that you go to, and you hang out, afterwards, and grab dinner or whatever. But then you also do deals with those people. Like, had we not been going to those education events, we wouldn't own half of a self-storage facility in Wisconsin that's going to cash flow great and it's going to be a great deal. And I actually, coincidentally, the guy I was talking to right before we started this interview, I just got a referral from him, and he and I were talking at Gary Johnston's Financial Freedom last year about a deal that he had that he's a lender on. His IRA is a lender on, and the borrower doesn't want the property anymore. And he, emailed me a week ago and said, "Hey, I think this deal is finally resurrecting. Are you still interested?" And I signed the contract on it today. And if the numbers work out, it'll be a hefty profit on that deal. So it's the classroom outside the classroom that you get to enjoy as well at those events.
Good answer. These days, what type of investing do you do?
Landlording, buy and hold, infill development, new construction in existing neighborhoods.
Divide infill or in-field development.
Infill development means we're not going out and buying a raw piece of land and developing a subdivision and building houses. We're going into existing neighborhoods, mostly in East Nashville, that were platted in the 40s and 50s, and either finding a vacant lot if it's there for whatever reason, or buying houses that are in disrepair and tearing them down and then building back in their place. So we don't have to put in the roads, the infrastructure, all of that's already there. We're just doing infill development. But again, as I mentioned, we're trying to move more towards the lending side. So we've opened a hard money lending business, which is where we want to focus our efforts, and then hang on to the rentals and still do the landlording thing, but be a little less active in the development side of things.
If you were forced to start over today, and you could only pick one creative deal structuring tool to use, which would it be and why?
I've got no money. I'm starting over with
You have no money, you have your knowledge, you have your skills, you don't have any assets.
Then I'd probably start with master leasing.
Why?
Because it takes no money. and it's scalable. And there's lots of opportunity out there to do it.
What does your schedule look like these days? Your weekly schedule? How many hours are you putting in? And I know that your schedule fluxes a good bit, but roughly.
Man, the amount of hours that I have to work each week is minimal. Like 10 to 15 hours that I need to put in. So probably end up working 20 to 25-ish, something like that, hours a week. Just because I like working, and so I'll keep working, and I like real estate and talking real estate and doing this kind of thing. So yeah, I work more than I have to, but in terms of actually, what it would take to keep our business going, it's minimal at this point.
Tell me about your very favorite deal ever.
That's probably the trailer park deal. I'm trying to think of another one that would be. Yeah, there's another fun one that involves my kids' educational savings accounts and a mortgage and an option and capturing all of the profits from an Airbnb on that property, but that's a little complicated. But that's probably my most fun deal structuring deal. But yeah, the trailer park, 18 acres at the foot of the Smoky Mountains, is probably my favorite deal.
Okay, so that happened early on, though. So let's think about the one that involved your kid's education account, okay? How did you go from that very first deal, first 2-3 deals you described? Let's go to that very first deal, right? To the deal that has all the moving parts. How did you go from the investor you were to the investor that you are?
It's just education. So learning the tools to be able to put all of those moving parts together. Because it really was, well, one, it's using a self-directed account, which a lot of people don't realize exists. And so that's an IRA, a 401k, an HSA, or in my case, a Coverdale educational savings account that I was using for my kids. So I can actually, well, I can't because I'm over the income threshold, but other people can invest money in my kids' ESAs. And I get to direct those into real estate investments. And so, one, knowing that that's possible is just through education events. Two, understanding the structure, because there was an option involved, there was a participation mortgage involved, understanding the lien structure in terms of first and second position, a partial release that was involved in this deal. So all of those, it's a cool deal because there's 5 or 6 different parts that kind of all, converge into one deal.
And when you heard Brandon just talk about different deal structuring tools, and a lot of people watching this video have never heard of these things before, just understand that real estate investing, the deal structuring is a learned language. And you learn words, then you learn sentences, then you learn paragraphs, then you learn pages. But it's not going to be done in a day or in a class. It's over a course of time. If you're talking to someone who's just starting out, what's your best piece of advice for them?
We keep saying it, but education is for sure a key, and there's so much of it that's free at this point. Like, you and Vina are doing the class that people can jump on, and the podcast and that, and you can jump on YouTube and learn stuff there, and there's a lot of ways to get books, listen to books, audiobooks. Yeah, you've got to, as you said, you have to learn that language, or at least start to learn that language. So yeah, the education is a big piece of it. And then secondly is just take action. There are so many people that get analysis paralysis, and they do all the education and they know all the deal structuring, and or at least know part of the deal structuring, and they're frozen and never actually do anything because they're afraid. And so you've got to take action and get out there and do a deal. And know that it might not work out exactly how you hoped it's going to work out, but you're going to learn from it and then move on to deal number 2 and 3 and 4 and hopefully hundreds after that.
Looking forward, what are your real estate investing goals?
I want more time freedom in my life right now, so I don't want to do deals that are going to require me to work more than I want to work. And so it's the Pete Fortunato quote, I'll take any part of the deal except for the work. And if I can invest money in the deal and get a return on it, then I'm all about that. If I can move to a better property that's going to get me better cash flow, then I'm all about that. But I'm not going to be showing up and painting a wall or managing a rehab or doing physical labor, that sort of thing. So my goals are to find deals that generate great returns without too much involvement from me on the other side of it.
As a real estate investor, what have been the biggest obstacles you faced?
I think I'd probably say that negativity, because as much as I want to say I was always optimistic, like it's the self-talk of, well, what if this doesn't work out, or even though I'm telling myself up here that everything's going to be fine, it's going to be a great deal. That the negativity of just other people, their impressions of what real estate investing is or isn't, and because real estate investors are a different breed, and that I guess ties back into the education piece a little bit too. Like the more time you spend around real estate investors and people that are freedom minded, you pick up their language and you feed off of each other. So it's a good community to be around and not have those negative thoughts.
To achieve success, is sacrifice required?
Almost always. Yeah.
So what sacrifices have been required of you?
Had to drive cars I didn't really want to be driving, and had to pick up a second job in 2012 because extenuating circumstances, but had 2 mortgages to pay, and it was a bad year for the business and didn't have the income coming in, and so I'm picking up a second job to make ends meet, and time, spending a lot of time, sacrificing time to find the next deal or whatever it took. Like, the 3 of us have wired up houses and, got to the end of the job and everything's done except for the hardwood floors. And so we're over there on a Friday night putting the hardwood floors in ourselves. And, so early on there was definitely a lot of bootstrapping it. We got to get this done, and whatever it takes to get it done is what you got to do to get to the finish line.
Were those sacrifices that you had to pay worth it?
Absolutely.
How come?
Because we've now created a life for ourselves where we pretty much get to do whatever we want to do. And so, I'm not like private jet wealthy or anything crazy, but I can stop working, and if I want to stop working, and I get to keep working because I like working, but if I want to take a month off and go hang out in Napa, California for a month, then I'll do that. So yeah, for sure they were worth it.
Probably the most important question I'm going to ask you. When you hit the proverbial brick wall, we all hit it, and you're like, ready, you're throwing up your hands, and just, what kept you from quitting?
I think for me it was just knowing that this was the best option. Like, it would have been easier at some points to throw in the towel and go back and be a mortgage broker, or get a 9-to-5, or I do have that little problem with authority that I'd have to deal with in terms of working for someone else, but but just knowing, like, yes, this is hard and this is not particularly pleasant to have to go through, but I know that and believe that at some point this is all going to be worth it. And so it's back to your question about the future and the finish line of knowing that one day this is going to pay off. And your growth as a real estate investor, for most real estate investors at least, is like, you don't have a graph that's like, I guess it'd be this way. It's not like you start here and you end up here on your wealth growth. It's more like a hockey stick kind of thing. And so you do this and you get a little bit of traction and you get a little more and a little more, and then all of a sudden, probably 7, 8, 9 years in, you kind of hit that where your knowledge is at a point where it's, you know more than 95% of investors that are out there, and then you're getting to that point in your amortization schedules and more people know what you do and more deals are flowing your way, and then all of a sudden you're here, and it's, I mean, we're in 2022, so COVID has, a big part of this with what's happened with real estate prices, or the demise of the denominator, the US dollar. But yeah, close to 40% of my net worth has been created in the last 2 years. And so it's 10 or 12 years of this, and then all of a sudden you're hitting that hockey stick.
That's a great analogy. I've never heard it described that way, but that was a great analogy. You just go along, then all of a sudden one day you wake up going, what just happened?
Wait a minute, I've got some cash flow here.
Yeah, what happened? Yeah. I remember the first time that we had more money at the end of the month than we had at the beginning of the month. And I went to my office manager's house. And I sat down with Tara and said, you've messed up the books. And we went through it, and it was no mistake. We had like $4,000 more in the bank at the end of the month. And we paid the normal bills. And the next month it happened again. And the next month it happened again. And I went by our house. I mean, it was probably 6, 7 months of me going to our house at the end of each month, just trying to figure out where we were messing up, because it did not make any sense, because we've been broke for so stinking long. Not broke. We had equity, or we were trying to pay off our houses. We were doing well with that, but we didn't have any money. There was no extra. So a lot of investors come face to face with this brick wall. And we hit it for different reasons. What's your advice to them?
You got to look into the future. You got to know that even though it's hard, at some point in the future, it's all going to be worth whatever you got to do to keep pushing through that brick wall.
Now I want to move to big picture stuff. What's the single biggest life lesson you've ever learned?
I think this is probably a recent phenomenon for me, and that's the whole concept of most people go to work and then fit in their life around that. And so it's like, okay, well, I got to go to work, and so I'm going to do my 9 to 5 or 40, 50, 60 hours, whatever it is. And then I'm going to figure out to live the life I want to live around that schedule. And I think that's completely the opposite of how you should structure things. I think you should go, what's the life that I want to live? And put that together and actually write it down and figure out what do I want my life to look like? What do my relationships look like? Where do I live? What activities do I do? What charities do I give to? What are my friends like? How do I spend time with my kids? And write all that down, and then take that and say, okay, well, how do I have this? And then build a business that is around achieving that vision. And so for me, that's been a really big shift, because we always knew we were working towards financial freedom and that sort of thing, but just in the last couple of years have I started asking myself the questions of what's the life that I actually want to live, and how do I achieve that goal of getting to that vision. So
did you join Sean McCluskey's group?
I haven't yet.
So that's exactly
that's
exactly what he teaches. So
yeah, that's where it came from Sean and Dave.
His name's Sean McCluskey. Good guy.
Yep.
Helped a lot of people. So in your investing career, what'd you do right?
took action. I think back to my advice is you got to actually do something with the information that you learn. And so for whatever reason, and for me, I think it was good to be in a partnership, and I advise people don't do partnerships. Like, I think if you want to partner on a deal here or there, then that may be okay if you need to bring in a partner on the deal. But for the most part, I think partnerships where you're doing almost all of your investing with one or two or three other people, generally a bad idea because they usually don't end well. We've been so far the anomaly in that.
And y'all really have been.
Yep. But what question am I answering again?
What'd you do right?
Oh, yeah. So the taking action piece, like for me, it was a lot easier to take action if somebody else is in the boat with me. And so having that partnership of, we're heading in a direction and there's two other guys in the boat with me that are rowing in that same direction, and hopefully it's the right direction. But with my personality, like I work well having other people that I know are depending on me and I'm depending on them to, keep rowing and keep the boat going in that certain direction. So yeah, I think as long as you're willing to take action, and then the education piece of like making sure that you've got the right boat and the right oars and you're in the right ocean and you're heading to the right island, and that's all the education piece of it is figuring out how you're going to get to where you're going to go.
What'd you do wrong?
Did not get the right mentors or education early enough. So there were, I look back and in some ways I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because I could have ended up with the wrong mentors and been over leveraged to the hilt and lost my shirt and everything else in 08. But yeah, looking back, those first few deals, like could have, one, not done them because they were bad deals, or structured them a lot better. And so yeah, we took way too long to get involved with our local real estate groups and find the right mentors and teachers to, because there's no point in making your own mistakes. Like, you get to learn from the mistakes that everybody else has made before you and piggyback off of their success. And yeah, so I wish we would have done that sooner.
And what didn't you do that you wish you would have done?
I mean, hindsight's 20/20. So I mean, anybody living in 2022 would be like, I should have just bought everything that ever existed for the last 13 years since the crash. So yeah, outside of buying more property, I don't have a lot of regrets.
What turns you on?
We're talking real estate here.
General. It could be whatever you want to talk about, as broad as you want to go.
The deal. Yeah, like I could care less about the rehab or what happens with the house, like after we acquire it, but like chasing the deal and figuring out the best way to structure it, and how can I do this in a tax-free vehicle or tax-deferred vehicle, and how can I put all the puzzle pieces together to make the deal work. Like, that's the part I love about real estate investing.
What turns you off?
Work. Yeah, do it. Yeah, dude. Like actually having to go out and work on a property and dealing with the government turns me off, which has become more and more of a pain with the infill development business that we have, and why I want to stop doing that and move towards the lending side. Because the lending side is fun because you've got, usually newer investors, to intermediate investors that we're loaning to. And so I get to sit down and look at their deals and go, okay, well, why don't you structure it this way? Like, we had a guy come to us a couple months ago that was like, hey, I need transactional funding on this deal. And I said, well, that's great, and I'd love to take your money, and we'll charge you the transactional funding fee, but why don't you just structure it like this, and then you don't need us? And so I just told him how to restructure the deal and saved him the $3,000 or $4,000 fee that he was going to pay to us. And he was like, man, that's really great. And I was like, yeah. I was like, well, I mean, if you want, you can still send me a $3,000 check, but but I got to one, help him out and structure the deal in a better way. But now I've also created an ally because he knows that I want him to make good deals, and I'm not just interested in getting a paycheck from the lending side of things. That, you know, he can bring a deal to me and figure out a better way to structure it and figure it out. So now I've created an ally through that as well.
So this is going more big picture stuff too. This is more broad life. What's your favorite sound?
Sound?
Sound.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Right now, the only thing that comes to mind is a boat engine, because I'm really into wake surfing right now. That's not a very good answer, but it's the only one I got.
But it's a good answer. What's your least favorite sound?
Got to go with like nails on a chalkboard on that one.
You've lived a full life. You're standing at the pearly gates. What do you want God to tell you when he sees you?
I want to get to the end of my life and know that I've been the best husband that I can be to my wife, and the best dad that I can be to my kids. And I don't really care about much else. Like, that kind of goes back to that vision thing and realizing like those are like, that's how I define success is, am I a good husband? Am I a good father? And it's easier to do those things when you have more time. And I get to have more time now because of real estate investing. And so real estate investing is just a vehicle to get me to time freedom to be able to accomplish those two goals, which are two most important goals in my life.
And this is strictly up to you. If you want people to be able to reach you, how would they reach you? How do they contact you?
My cell phone is 615-294-2777.
This is going to be on the internet.
Yeah. No one's going to call me, but if you want to, 615-294-2777.
Does this go to your voicemail that says, I do not take voicemail mails
correct.
here. You're going to have to text me no matter what else you do. You're going to take that,
Yes.
that one?
But there are instructions to leave a voicemail. If you really want to leave a voicemail, you just got to call a different number.
You make me jump through a lot of hoops.
Yeah, I got to the point where I was just like, I'm never checking these voicemails, and so finally I just changed it and said, I don't check voicemails here at this number, so text me if you want to get in touch with me, or if you do need to leave a voicemail, here's how you do it. So yeah, that's my cell, and then it's Brandon R at urbandwellhomes.com.
Spell Brandon.
BRANDON.
Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome.